And good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Charles Baldwin. I am the Program Officer for Access and Inclusion, as well as the UP Initiative. Today, we are hosting this UP Innovation Fund info session to talk about the $5,000 grant that organizations with UP designation can easily receive and some of the criteria that is shifting as we use our wonderful UP network as an experiment for what we might be doing with all the organizations at the Mass Cultural Council. So we are cutting edge. So again, happy to have you all here. Nicole and Portia, before we jump in, I'm just going to have you introduce yourselves, and then I will start my slideshow.
I'll start. Hi, everyone. I'm Nicola Gois. I use she, her pronouns. I am a light-skinned Latina woman with shoulder-length brown hair, and I am the managing director of Open Door Arts. Really glad to be here with all of you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Portia Brown. I also use the she, her pronouns. I'm a white woman with long blonde hair wearing glasses today, and I am the director of operations for Open Door Arts.
And as ever, happy to have you in the room and really happy to be partnering all these years, both within the role I've had at the council and certainly before and after with all sorts of things. We're going to jump into the slideshow here. All right. Can people see slideshow? Well, it looks like my computer is going to be going through an update. Lovely. All right. Everyone can see the screen, the Innovation Fund. I've used this photo. There's a couple of photos that I've used that really aren't relevant to the information on the slide, but I enjoy adding pictures. This image, of course, is from the Israeli theater troupe Nalagat, from Not by Bread Alone, where a group of deafblind performers baked bread and invited the audience to eat it with them on stage. And I just think it's a lovely image and a lovely thought. But we're here to discuss the UP Innovation Fund in fiscal year 25. This, of course, is the 10th anniversary of the UP initiative. I know. And there have been a lot of changes. And so as we think about what UP is going to look like in 2025 and beyond, you all, the folks in the room and everyone who's part of the UP initiative, are really part of this cutting edge movement as the council thinks about what can we do to hold organizations accountable and really be thinking about the not only access, but hinting at our work on liberation politics around disability justice. So as a reminder, the council has now been investing for a while in this idea of excellence. What does excellence or successful access look like? I've posted the 4 characteristics of the UP designation here on this slide about providing training for everyone. That's educating not only internally your staff, but really this is also part of the peer network, the sharing of resources, engages and user experts to inform. And so this is really the with me, not for me part of the characteristics, to work with people with disabilities when determining and finalizing policy, assistive technologies, and different practices. Third characteristic is coordinates and integrates a vision of inclusion throughout the entire organization. This is not a one-off, it's not a one-person deal. It really is about touching all aspects of your organization. And then finally, innovates. Innovates, of course, is a small word for a big part of taking risks, trial and error. And this is why when it comes to our annual reports, I'm always saying, be candid. Don't worry about being perfect. This work sometimes can be messy. Appreciate everyone who did your final report, the annual report for 24. Thank you, thank you, thank you. A few sort of principles, ideas really rose to the top. The need and the desire for centralized resources, which is something that is ongoing with our partnership with Open Door Arts. There's also this question about sustainability. This grant isn't going to be forever. How are we going to sustain our practices? And then the flip side, of course, is how can the Mass Cultural Council hold us accountable, hold organizations accountable? We're not a punitive group, but we want to make sure that word and action are in agreement. Another thing that really rose to the top was the integration of access. Again, this idea that access is embedded into everything and it's not just its separate silo. And a lot of folks wanting to invest in education. Our youth, the trauma they've experienced, the world is a tough place, and really thinking about our kids. This screen, of course, doesn't even have the correct image that I took off of the website, but it is to, and I'll put the link in the chat, but it starts on the Mass Cultural Council Up Organization Innovation Fund page, and that talks about attending the info session and learning about how great we are, but it also will have the direct link to the application. Having been in many of your profiles, the part here that I want to remind folks with is look at your organizational profile. A lot of them are empty, and that is everything from the executive director to the person who would be the organizational person for the grant, as well as the accessibility coordinator. And what we all learned last year is that we don't want 10 partial submissions. So save draft, save draft, save draft. When you first log on to your page, your home page through the GMS, you'll see either in Up, you've got an application that's available to you, or it's in progress. So we want to remind you, it's complicated for us, it's complicated for you. We want to make sure that you save draft and are working on one. Hi, Maureen. I see your hand is up.
Yeah, good morning, Charles and everybody. It's Maureen Hennessy from the Clark and this morning, the beautiful but chilly Berkshires. I just wanted to say about the profile, I noticed that too when I went on to look at the application. But as soon as I clicked on edit or whatever it is to start it, it then did fill in. So all my people were already there. So I know it may look blank, but you know, when you're just reading it, it made no sense to me, but like our director was there, I was there, our access coordinator.
Thank you, Maureen. That's a really good reminder, because I've actually even said that to other folks. Hit that save draft button and a lot of those windows will populate. If they don't populate, please spend a moment to fulfill your organizational profile. Where am I? As last year, so again, the images that we're seeing are screen shares from another department. I just cut and paste, but it's a reminder, if your signatories are the same, that you won't need to have a new CASEL form. Still put in those names, but you won't need to get a new CASEL form, which will make the contract that much easier. If anything has changed, your organizational name has changed, or the signatories have changed, you will need to get a new CASEL form. That's okay. It does mean that your grant will take a little bit longer, But it also, I've got approval that for folks who are filling it out and haven't had changes, it's not going to delay your.
Okay to run, so we're running it.
I don't,
That's,
Is
I'm not
there-
happy with it, but
do you want me to not run it?
no,
there's someone
I
who
don't-
would be
I mean-
on.
I was saying,
I'm just
yes,
confirming with
That's
you.
you, Nina.
no, I'm,
Nina,
Muted, so you're all set. We were just seeing a conversation in the office. But a reminder when you are filling this out, that if all the information is the same, you're good. And if not, it just means you'll have a Newcastle form and it takes a little bit longer. And a reminder that that is a time-sensitive window. So the Innovation Fund, the application opened on the 11th. I really promoted it on the 12th. We've got the info session today. The goal is to have all your applications in by October 2. This application is primarily attestations. I'm up designated. I'm going to spend it on access. So it is fairly quick. The award notification will be in November. The goal is to have your money in before the end of this calendar year. And then when it comes to the annual report, that will be on in July. But as noted, the fiscal year 25 annual report does include the self-assessment attestation, which is really what we'll be talking about today. So the organizations must be up designated, the money must be spent on access, and access as determined by you, your priorities, your capacity. So it's not something that's from up on high, it's really based on what you are doing at your organization. We are asking you to take the self-assessment tool before June 30th of 2025. And we're also requesting that at the end of that self-assessment tool, and Nicole and Portia will go over this a little bit more detail, I want you to put in the code UP 2025. And what this is going to do is give me data on UP organizations. What I want to find out is there a difference between UP orgs and non-UP orgs? So it's not a huge thing, but it is, as we think about the multi-year grant, this innovation fund that I'm trying to get to be a 5-year grant to maintain that or maintain this kind of investment from the council. The image on this, of course, is a sign that I saw in a Chelsea park that said, no, 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 no skateboarding, no bicycle riding, no scooter riding, as noted, no hide and seek. I've turned it upside down because we're a yes and crowd. When thinking about how you're spending the money on access, again, it's determined by you. It's a broad scope of ideas and actions. It could be education and professional development. It could be paying people on advisory boards or actually working with user experts on a site visit. It could be incorporating new technology that is being tried out to enhance participant experience, new programs, or even collaboration with other UP orgs or the rest of the orgs. But think creatively. And thinking about why this is happening. I mean, we've been pushing a lot of this agenda behind the scenes. So I've been working with Open Door Arts. They have great research, both towards the culture of access reports 1 and 2, which is something that the council is responding to with the recommendations that were provided. And this was the basis for the new Deaf and Disability Equity Plan. And again, I'll put that link in the chat. It was a fairly quiet launch in August that the board approved. And right now it's rooted in a lot of sort of operations compliance, which is why our focus is going to be programs and our external stakeholders and how we can support and improve access throughout our sector. Today, of course, we're going to look at the self-assessment. there's a couple of other days that this doesn't work. ODA Open Door Arts will be hosting one on October 8. There'll be an office hour on November 7. There's a spotlight that the council is doing on the tool that'll be on December 6th. And we'll have one final office hour.
Oh, no, sorry. I was, I had the same.
We'll have one final office hour in January for folks who are running a little tardier than some. And I think that is it. Oh, other than hinting at fiscal year 26, we are going to be asking for access plans. So really rooting this self-assessment tool and all the work that you're doing this year in the idea of an access plan. Been talking about it for 2 years. 2026, we're going to ask for it. And this is going to be something that we're really looking at for all the organizations we fund. It's just, as I said, the up cohort gets to be our experiment. So we want to do it up right. Also this year, we're going to be refining the criteria for up designation. What does it mean to be excellent? What does it mean to be successful in this? And how do you measure it? You know, the state loves a good measurement. And I'll be pushing out different education and training modules, as many free opportunities as I might that you or your staff can take advantage of. And then obviously, if you have questions, you can ask me directly. We've also got this session happening right now. Let's see, we've got any questions? Stuart, if your access coordinator has changed, that won't change the castle. Castle's all about the signatories, unless your access coordinator was one of the signatures. If your legal name has changed, yeah, you'll indicate that in the application. It asks you if there have been any changes. So that will mean you'll have a new castle form. Oh, I will put the self-assessment dates in the chat, and then we'll let Nicole and Portia start their portion. But I'll put that in the chat, and then it will also be in a follow-up email. All right.
All right. Great. This is Nicole. Can everybody see my screen? Okay, great. All right, so thanks, Charles. We're gonna go ahead and share a little bit more information about the Arts and Culture Accessibility Self-Assessment, which, as Charles said, is going to be a requirement for UP organizations this year. So we'll walk through the tool, kind of how it was created, and then give you a little bit of a tour so you can, preview it, and we can answer any questions you have before you get started. Just some quick introductions. If you're not familiar with Open Door Arts, we are a Massachusetts-based organization that really works uniquely at the intersection between disability, arts, and education. And our mission is to promote access, representation, and participation of people with disabilities in arts and culture. The image here, the slide has our logo at the bottom as well. Portia and I just introduced ourselves at the beginning, but just really quickly, again, we are the two kind of representatives of our team on the call today. And as I said, I'm Nicole Agois. I'm managing director of Open Door Arts. I use she, her pronouns, and the image on the slide is a picture of me. I'm a light-skinned Latina woman with shoulder-length brown hair, and I'll pass it to Portia.
Yep, and I'm Portia Brown. I use the she, her pronouns. I'm the director of operations for Open Door Arts. And there's a black and white circular photo of me standing in front of the same woven piece of artwork. And I'm a white woman with long blonde hair.
And I wanted to also give a huge shout out to Hannah Goodwin, which I'm sure many of you know, who was cultural access specialist with Open Door Arts throughout the creation of the self-assessment tool. And she's not in the room, but she is very much in the tool, and her work is very clear and very present in the process. Also, again, Portia and I are the two people speaking with you today, but there was a very a large team of incredible humans who worked with us as advisors, as consultants, as designers of the tool throughout all stages, and I'll tell you more about that later. And on this slide, there are black and white images of 12 of them, some of whom you may recognize. But again, people who contributed to the tool in a number of different ways, from professional experience, personal lived experience with disability, and we are incredibly grateful to all of them. All right, so I'll pass it to Portia.
Great. Yeah, so we'll try to be brief, but we did think it was important, you know, in kind of learning about this tool to understand why we created this tool and like sort of how it even came to be before really diving into what it is and how to use it. So as Nicole sort of mentioned, you know, our organization has a 40-year history of kind of working at this intersection. And, you know, we had really found over our 40 years, especially in training arts and culture organizations and their staff and kind of adding those supports for accessibility, that, you know, we were hearing a lot of the same needs over and over again. And it didn't matter if we were working with, you know, a large outdoor botanical garden or a super small independent theater. A lot of the access needs we were hearing were kind of the same over and over. And so we really wanted to kind of test some of these assumptions and test some of this anecdotal information that we felt was really representative of the field. And so between 2022 and 2024, in partnership with Mass Cultural Council, we started doing a lot of research in Massachusetts, and we did some surveying of Just Up organizations. We also did surveys of, in the Towards a Culture of Access Part 1, arts and culture organizations across the state. And then in Towards a Culture of Access Part 2, we surveyed individuals with disabilities and caretakers of individuals with disabilities about their experiences with access in the Massachusetts arts and culture sector. And so I'm going to drop that link in the chat so you have it. Both reports are there, as well as screen reader friendly versions, so that you can see a little bit of the foundation along with our experience that led to the creation of this tool. And I'll highlight a couple of those as I go through. But really what we found overall is that there was a lot of variability in how organizations assessed, understood, and accessed accessibility. And unfortunately, that variability was creating fatigue, distrust, and harm for people with disabilities. So people with disabilities didn't know what to expect between organizations, didn't know how to, you know, request the services because it was different every time they went. And unfortunately, we saw that sometimes this fatigue and distrust was just too much. And it meant people were saying it's not worth it to try to engage. We did find, though, that people with disabilities would be more likely to visit arts and culture organizations if this changed. So we actually saw 72% of people in Towards a Culture of Access Part 2 said that they would be more likely to visit arts and culture organizations if they were more accessible and it were more easy to meet their access needs. We also found from organizations that organizations too want to be more accessible, right? And you all are part of this. You all are part of this group. You know, organizations weren't saying like, we don't want to do this. This is something we have to do. Organizations clearly were saying, we want to do this and we want to do this well. In our survey of UpOrgs, actually, 85% of UP-designated organizations said that they wanted ongoing self-assessment and accountability structures in as part of the process of being designated. So we know organizations want to do good work, but we also know that this idea of being accessible can be really overwhelming. It's huge. It's pervasive. It's every single part of your organization. And so in some cases, it was just feeling a little too big and a little too overwhelming. And so we really saw this as an opportunity for us, kind of given our unique position as an organization, to respond to this need and to try to provide, you know, our peer organizations and ourselves as people doing this work too, with tools that could make this process more easy and kind of give us all a common language and, you know, common resources so that we could all move forward together. And as Charles kind of alluded to, you know, be part of massive change. You know, we also see this tool as an opportunity that if we're all using it, if the entire state of Massachusetts is using it, you know, now we can really start to move the needle on access in the arts and culture sector.
All right, so Portia just went over the why, and we're going to tell you a little bit about how we created this tool, so the process that we went through. We had been thinking about this for a very long time. We've been looking at other tools. We've been doing research for a long time, but the process of creating the tool was a 2-year process. And you saw earlier all the people that were involved in that process. We really wanted to make sure that the entire process was disability centered. And that to do that, we gathered a team of advisors that had both professional experience with disability, experience with legal requirements, ADA 504, and also a lot of experience working within the arts and culture sector specifically. Also, advisors who brought personal lived experience with disability to really make sure that this tool is reflecting that lived experience. Of the advisors that we showed photos of earlier, we worked with 14 and at least 10 of them identify as disabled. And again, they brought experiences having different types of disabilities, different experiences working in different types of organizations or working as artists, working as cultural workers, etc., as administrators. And representing, again, different types of organizations. And we worked with user experts as well. So they advised from the very, very beginning. We worked with advisors all the way from the visioning process before we even identified a structure for the tool. They helped us identify the sections, the content, all the way to the specific assessment questions, the format of the tool, the creation of some of the supplemental tools, which we're going to share in a minute. And they helped us to vet the host platform that we ended up using to make sure that it was accessible and user-friendly. In terms of accessibility, we worked with 6 access consultants, including user experts who tested the tool. They helped us to test different tools with screen readers and for other accessibility considerations to make sure that we were using, the most accessible platforms possible. We also worked with ASL interpreters and deaf interpreters who helped us to provide ASL interpretation for videos that are part of a self-assessment, which again, we will show you in a minute. After that, we wanted to make sure that once the tool was created, that we tested it with real life organizations so that they could use it before we launched it publicly and give us feedback. So we had a national pilot. We had 127 organizations apply to pilot the tool, which was an incredible sign of the desire and the need for the tool, which we were really excited to see. And from those 127, we selected 13 that represented different types of organizations. So we had theaters, we had a zoo, we had a historic site, music ensembles, art museums, etc. We had organizations that were very large, like Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts large, and also organizations that were very small, like a very small rural theater, representing locations all over the country. Also organizations that were at different stages of their accessibility work, which was really important to us to know that this tool was applicable regardless of where in your process you are. So some of the organizations were very, very well established with their accessibility, and some of the organizations were just getting started. And then also we worked with organizations that had specific considerations when it comes to accessibility. So for example, we worked with a cultural division of an Indian nation because the legal requirements are different for Indian nations. We worked with organizations that had multiple facilities, so they had, again, different considerations in terms of how they would assess their organization. And we publicly launched the tool just less than 2 months ago on July 31st at the LEAD conference in Seattle.
So we'll just tell you a little bit about the self-assessment. So first and foremost, this is for arts and culture organizations. Again, this is our sector. This is, this is the field that we're in. And we had found that some of the tools out there just weren't specific to us, and the type of work that, we and our colleagues were doing. And so we really designed the questions and content to be specific to arts and culture organizations. And as Nicole kind of mentioned through the pilot, that means organizations of all sizes, all budgets, all types, all geographic locations, all settings, and at all stages of their accessibility work. And this last one was really important because we knew that, this couldn't be a tool just for people who are very new to this work or people who were very far along. We had to be able to, include the widest range of organizations possible. And so to do that, we designed supplemental materials and tools throughout the self-assessment to ensure that that scaffolding was there and that everyone could benefit from the tool. This tool was also disability centered, something that we also, didn't find as much as we wanted in some of the other tools that we were looking at and that we had used previously. So Nicole mentioned this, was from the very beginning, the idea for this, the need for this, the impetus to even create something like this was based on the desires and needs of people with disabilities in our community. It was created by experts with lived and professional experience in disability. We also felt that it was critical that in the questions and the self-assessment that disability history and culture be present and that there be a balance between humanity and best practice and legal compliance. It couldn't just be one or the other. Both of these things we felt were really critical to determine excellence in access. The tool is extremely comprehensive. You will see when you get in there, while it's still very user-friendly, we wanted to make sure that through this tool, this is all an organization needed to do in terms of self-assessment and that we didn't need to be finding, multiple tools and sourcing them from different places. So it's digital, it's self-paced. There are 300 questions and it covers 5 core areas of accessibility. And they are organizational approach, space, access services, communication, and programming. And then to sort of help with that comprehensive experience, at the end, every organization that completes it is provided with a customized report that will tell you how you're doing in each of the areas assessed, so you can really get a targeted understanding of where you are and how you can move forward. And then, as I mentioned, it is filled with resources. We wanted the experience of taking the self-assessment to be one of learning, and we wanted to make sure that everyone had what they needed to effectively self-assess. If you don't know what a term means or even what a question it's asking, how can you answer it? How can you grow from it? So we wanted to make sure that all along the way, any of those gaps were filled in with a resource, with a tool, with some sort of supplemental material to make it easy for organizations to use. So Nicole will go through these a little bit more on the tour, but there's a 90-question accessibility glossary. It really helps us as a field and as an up cohort if we're all speaking the same language and understanding the same terminology in the same way. There's a 504 ADA requirement ID tool. Again, we hear from so many orgs that we work with, what is required of me? I don't know. Am I in legal compliance? Am I not? Do I need to be? And so we created a really easy 12-question tool so that you can learn a bit more based on your size, your budget, where you are, as to what's required of you. There are accessibility plan templates, so you can take this learning and put it into action. There are guides all along the way with directions, examples, supports. There are links to important resources like the ADA Resource Center and the checklist for existing facilities. And then we also are providing, webinars and one-on-one coaching all along the way, especially to this cohort too. Please reach out at any time. We are here to help. We want the process to not only be easy, but truly to be enjoyable. So we hope that with the resources and, our team, we can make that experience possible for everyone. And this should probably be the first slide, but I'll say last but not least, this is totally and completely free. This was critical for us. We knew that this tool had to be free. We couldn't have any barriers for organizations to engage with this process. We want everyone to be able to do this work and do this work well. That's why our organization exists. So it is completely free to all organizations. You could share it with anyone you'd like, inside or outside of the UP network or the state of Massachusetts. And we just hope that, everyone can benefit from it as much as possible.
Awesome. Thank you, Portia. So now we're gonna show you the tool and give you a little bit of a tour so that you can get to see what things look like, where things are located, all of those different adjacent kind of tools and resources that we've put together so you know what they are and how to use them. This is going to be very at a glance, so we're hoping it gets, supports you in getting started. But again, as Portia said, by all means, if you ever have any other questions, you can always reach out to us. So I'm going to show you some slides of what we're going to cover, and then I'll go into screen share and share the actual tools. So first, I'm going to show you the self-assessment, so we get to see how to get in there and how to use it. Charles mentioned earlier that there is a place for you to put a code so that aggregate data can be shared with the council. Again, I want to emphasize this is aggregate data, not anonymous data. So your individual information will never be shared with the council, just the aggregate data so that the council can use that information to make better decisions on how to best support you. So I'll show you where to put that in. Then I will show you the report that gets created specifically for your organization after you complete the self-assessment so that you can see what that looks like and how to use that. We'll also show you one of the accessibility plan templates that we've created. And again, this will not be a requirement for your organization for the council until the following year, but we'll still show you what it looks like so you know how to use it. And then we'll briefly show you now two of the supplemental tools that Portia mentioned earlier. The first is the accessibility glossary. Again, it has 90 terms related to accessibility, and it has brief definitions for each of those terms and additional resources. So 1 or 2 links for additional resources. And it is linked within the self-assessment and within some of the other tools so that you can get direct access to each of those terms whenever they show up. So if you're going through the self-assessment and a term shows up and you say, gee, I don't know what a transition plan is, you can click on it and it takes you to the glossary so that it helps provide that definition. So I'll show you that in a minute. And then the other tool I'll show you is the ADA/504 self-identification tool, which again, Portia described earlier. It is an adjacent tool, which you're welcome to use, and we actually recommend that you do. It has 12 simple yes or no questions, and then based on your responses to those questions, it'll give you a report that outlines the laws and regulations that apply specifically to your organization based on a number of considerations, and it helps you to kind of better understand those responsibilities and learn more. We recommend it as a precursor before you take the self-assessment. All right, so I am going to get out of the slideshow and go really quickly to show you these tools. First, again, those 2 additional tools. This is the accessibility glossary. Again, so you will see terms, and then you will see definitions of those terms and links. You can navigate on this toolbar here on the left so that you can jump easily from terms, and I'll show you how it's linked within the self-assessment. The identification tool really quickly is also an online tool. As I was saying, is 12 yes or no questions. So again, you get a simple question and you answer yes or no. So for example, is your organization a non-government organization that is open to the public? Yes or no? And so you would answer those questions. There's questions around your funding, whether you own your space, etc. And then when you hit finish, you will get a report that will tell you, based on the questions that you said yes to, it'll tell you what your legal requirements are, again, based specifically on your organization. So with that, I'm going to go straight into showing you the self-assessment and how to get in there. To get to the self-assessment, you will go to artsaccessresources.org. Portia is going to put the link in the chat. Again, artsaccessresources.org. That will take you to this landing page. And you will see at the bottom, there are 3 boxes. In blue is the link to the self-assessment. We also have ways to sign up for one-on-one support sessions or Zoom Q&A sessions. But you will click on Get Access, and that will take you right into the self-assessment. This landing page has a self-assessment guide highlighted here. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to take a moment to read the self-assessment guide, because it will help you so much with getting organized, assembling your team, finding out the information that you need in order to get started. So it just really helps simplify the process, and it has links to those additional resources that we've mentioned. So highly recommend that you start by reading the self-assessment guide. Next, below in this box, you will enter your email address. I want to just pause for 1 second and say, you can enter any email address you want. It does not have to be associated with your organization. You can use a personal email address. In no place of the self-assessment, we will ask you for your organization's name. And this is a really important consideration, because we want to make sure that this information is anonymous. You will not be sharing that with Open Door Arts. We will not be sharing that with anyone else. So this is for you. You can be candid, because this is for you. It's a self-assessment, not an assessment. So when you put an email address here, just make sure you remember which email address you use, because that's the email address that you will need to get back to it. Once you enter your email address, you will go into the self-assessment. It will also trigger an automatic email that will go to that email address that has a unique link. And with that unique link, you can come and go into the self-assessment as many times as you want, so that you can time it however you like, and you can do it 1 section at a time if that works best for you. All right, and this is what it looks like once you're in. A couple of features to point out is we have a progress bar on the top, so you'll get a sense of how far you are. There's a save progress button to the right. You don't really need to use it, but it's always a good idea to keep saving your progress. The tool should save your progress automatically. Also, at the beginning of each section, you will have a downloadable PDF of each of the sections. So if you prefer to download it, to print it, to share it that way, if it's more accessible to you, you can do that. Then you will have an introduction in written English, and then the same introduction in a video form, in spoken English with captions and with ASL. At the bottom, you can hit next or previous. Okay, and now we are in the assessment questions. The first section, as Portia said, is organizational approach. So we have 5 sections. Again, organizational approach, space, access services, communication, and programming. I'm going to show you very briefly what these look like and how they're organized. For each of the 5 sections, you will have, again, that downloadable PDF, which has the introduction and all the questions for that section. We'll have a written preface, some resources and links for the section, including legal resources and documents and guides that will help you with the content of that section. You'll have that video again for that section. You might recognize Karen in that video. And then we get into the questions. So the questions are organized, each of the 5 sections is organized into multiple subsections. So for example, here, values, beliefs, and mindsets is one of the subsections for the organizational approach section. You will have a certain number of questions, and for each of the questions, you have 6 response options, and these are consistent throughout the entire self-assessment. The options are fully true, mostly true, somewhat true, not true, not sure, and not applicable. And just want to emphasize trying to, stay away from these as much as possible. So really ask yourself the question, is it truly not applicable? So for example, not applicable would be if this is a question about your parking, the accessibility of your parking lot, and you don't have a parking lot, then it is not applicable. But there are a lot of things where you might need to push yourself a little bit to see if it's truly not applicable. Here is an example of how the glossary looks like within the self-assessment. So in this question, you will see that the term intersectionality is in blue. It is also a link and it's underlined. If you hover over that term, a pop-up will come up that defines that term right as a pop-up. You can also click on it and it will take you to the document. So we know that pop-ups are not screen reader friendly. So we had that additional option to click and go directly to the glossary. Another feature that I want to point out that you will see throughout the self-assessment is, I'm scrolling really quickly, my apologies. Okay, so in the section around employment, for example, question 8, at the end of the question, you will see that there is an asterisk, like a little star. What that means is that there is a legal requirement associated with this question. So again, just keep that in mind as you go through the process. If you have taken the identification tool that we showed you earlier, you'll have a better understanding of how this applies directly to your organization. But the asterisk means there is a legal requirement associated with that question. I'm going to scroll really quickly to the bottom of the section. You will see at the bottom of each of the 5 sections, there's a space where you can take notes, again, to keep track of your responses, to share specific things with your team as you're taking the self-assessment. Now I'm hitting next. And I'm going to go to the second section, which is space. And you may have noticed that each of the 5 sections is color coded. And we'll show you later what that looks like. Again, same format with the introduction and the links for the section. The space section is more thorough than the other sections just because there are many access considerations, specifically around design standards and legal considerations relating to physical space. So we have provided a companion tool, which is the ADA checklist for existing facilities, to help you better understand what those requirements are. And I'm going to show you very quickly what that looks like. So you will see, I'm just going to scroll really quickly to question 11. In this question, you will see this is about exterior routes to your entrance, meeting ADA requirements. And you will see there's an asterisk at the end. And then we have in parentheses some numbers. So the asterisk means, again, this is there's a legal requirement associated to this. And the numbers in the parentheses mean that we are showing you which section of the ADA checklist relates to exterior routes. So I'm going to show you very quickly what that looks like. So now I'm in the ADA checklist again, which is this companion document, and I'm in the exterior accessible routes section. So 1.13 will tell me what the standards are. And so when you're taking the self-assessment, if we ask you a question like exterior routes to our entrances meet ADA requirements for dimension, slope, curb ramps, etc., and you say, hey, I don't know what the ADA requirements are, you can go here and go to that other tool, and that will tell you the information that you need. I'm going to scroll very quickly. Again, you'll have time to go through these sections just to show you the 5 sections. And I apologize because there's a trash truck outside my window, so I hope you can still hear me okay. Again, the 3rd section is access services. And I will just scroll through this. This includes things like ASL interpretation, seating, things like closed captioning, audio description, etc. So I'm going to scroll down. Then I'm going to go to the 4th section, which is communication. You'll see this is in purple. Communication is about how you communicate about people with disabilities as an organization, and also how you communicate what you offer in accessible ways. So I'm going to scroll down. Again, apologies for the quick scrolling. I just want you to see at a glance what the sections are. And then the last section is programming. Programming is a little bit shorter because a lot of the considerations for programming are already captured in the other sections of the self-assessment. So again, a little bit shorter. And then we get to the end of the self-assessment. You have completed it. You will see the top bar. We are at 88% now. And this is the closing section, the last bit before you close out. We're going to ask you for some basic demographic information, just what type of organization you are. Again, we will never ask you for your organization's name. Secondary type, if that's applicable. The size of your staff, the size of your budget, and what state you're located in. Again, this is a national tool. And then here, very quickly, want to make sure that we are on the same page around this. Make sure when you get to this part that when it asks you the question, do you agree to have your anonymous responses included in an aggregate data set, that you say yes. This is what will allow us to share that aggregate data set back with the council. And in this line here, you can enter the code up 2025. Again, that is going to help us take that data that is just from the up cohort, the aggregate data, and share it back with the council so the council can better support you. Make sure that you are absolutely ready to be done, that you've answered all the questions before you hit finish, because once you've hit finish, you will get a report triggered. And I'm going to show you very quickly what a report looks like. This is just for your organization. You do not have to turn this report into the council. Open Door Arts will also not have access to this report. So this will just get sent automatically to you. It's essentially reflecting back what you answered in the form of scores so that you can get a sense of which areas you are doing really well in and which sections might need more attention. So you will get an overall organization score. Then you will get scores for each of those 5 sections, again, color-coded so that you can kind of see them at a glance. So you start to see, again, where are the higher scores, where are the lower scores, so that you can pay attention to things. And then each of the 5 sections will be broken into the subsections so that you can start to see more details. So here's where you start to see, again, more of that variability and where to focus your attention. I'm going to scroll through all of these to show you also what happens next, which is the process of creating your accessibility plan. We're going to give you some guidance and some tools. As a reminder, you do not have to complete an accessibility plan as a requirement for the council until FY26. But you can this year if you'd like to. We'll give you some steps to help you organize the process of creating your accessibility plan. And we're going to give you some resources and support, including 2 templates that we created. One is an Excel or Google Sheet format, and the other one is Word or Google Doc. And I will show you what that one looks like. So this is the Excel version of our template. Where you can start outlining what category, which of the 5 categories the item is in, what is the item that you need to improve, what is the issue with it, what is your plan for improvement, and then you can add things like completion dates, who is responsible, whether there's a cost and what the cost might be, or an average, sources of funding, priority level, and where you are in terms of progress. I want to also emphasize that the accessibility plan is required in FY26. So by June 30 of 2026, not a completion of your accessibility plan, just the creation of the accessibility plan, which is an important distinction to make. So I will go back to the slides. And with that, I can see that the chat has been very active while I was presenting. So we're going to pause here and take some questions. I will actually maybe stop sharing so that we can see each other.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
First of all, I know there are a lot of questions, but I am so excited to actually have this tool available to us. This is part of the movement that we've really been talking about for a decade. So, and I just want to impart that my enthusiastic sort of excitement about this to everyone on this call. This is a real breakthrough in helping organizations not only be more accessible, but because we're the up cohort, we're, again, a maverick on pushing the envelope. So that's a great big note of gratitude. And now we can go back to questions. And Maureen had a question that came through about a connection to the NEA, whether it's a duplicate or an overlap with their space section.
Yeah, Maureen, happy to answer that. We have been in a lot of conversation with the NEA since creating this, as you can imagine. To give a little bit of context to folks who may not be aware of this, the NEA, if you are a grantee of the NEA or a pass-through grantee of the NEA, so for example, any organization that receives funds from the Mass Cultural Council is a pass-through grantee of the NEA because funds come from the NEA through the council. You do have a legal requirement to complete a 504 self-evaluation every 3 years and have a transition plan, also known as an accessibility plan, on file. the NEA created a handbook called the Cultural Accessibility, I am butchering this, the Cultural Administrators, I am forgetting the name. Anyway, it's an administrator's handbook, and then also a self-assessment tool. Those tools were created in 2003, and they have been in the process and really working hard to get that updated. And there are many legal complications in terms of getting that done. So the NEA is very aware of the fact that those tools are outdated. And we have been working with them to, and we should be hearing back soon, hoping that this is a tool that can be used instead of in the meantime. So we will be updating you all so that you are, because our tool is 504 and ADA. Their tool, I mean, they're very similar, but their tool is maybe like more directly 504 focused, and it's not as best practice focused. It's very legal compliance focused. So they are aware, very aware. They've been very involved in all the conversations. And so we will send confirmation once and if that is the case. But you should be able to have this as a fulfillment of that requirement.
This is Charles. I'm responding to Bailey's question about how will organizations notify me as a representative of the council that you've completed the self-assessment. It'll be part of your annual report. It'll, again, merely be an attestation. I've done this. Because the data, again, if you use the code 2025, then I get the data. And there will be additional data that Open Door has based on other organizations that have gone through this. And that's the comparison that I'll be looking at. So it's really a simple attestation. And as Nicole and Portia both said, I don't have access to your reports or the information. It's yours. Happy to work with you and helping you, as both Nicole and Portia have said, and sort of actualizing the access plan, which you have 2 years to really complete. Don't wait until the end of the year. The self-assessment tool, and again, this isn't, there's the supplementals, which I think are really important to review. Self-assessment itself in general, we were chatting earlier, it takes a couple of hours. So you really want to give yourself, your team, a moment to review it, to perhaps participate, save it, and go back into it after you've really had a good look.
Yeah, I can speak a little more to the timing because I know it will come up. I'm just waiting for someone to ask it in the chat. And then Mary, I do see your question and I'll respond to that also. But yeah, through our pilots and the other organizations that we can see that have taken it, the average time it took to complete the entire self-assessment was 2.6 hours. So then within that average, we have a range of 1 hour to 7 hours for completion of the self-assessment. And through feedback conversations, we have a pretty good handle on where that range came from. So to kind of help you understand, we saw faster completion times of smaller organizations with smaller staff, where maybe if there was a team of 2, for example, the executive director was intimately familiar with all those areas of the assessment, so that individual could sit down and relatively quickly answer those questions on their own. Once we got up to kind of the 7-hour process was when I can tell you specifically about that because that was our longest. So that was a team where access was very new to them. They wanted representatives that could kind of speak to each of those 5 core section areas from their organization. And they wanted the team to answer all the questions together. So the team sat on 3 different meeting times, and with representatives from all those areas, one by one, went through the questions, discussed them, came up with kind of an answer as a group. And so that's when the process took that amount of time. That kind of mid-range is sort of for mid to large organizations that had a representative that kind of went off independently, got the responses, the team came back together, talked, got things entered, and that's where it took about 2.5 hours. So just to give you a sense, and there are in that guide too, there are some different recommendations for how you can think about and plan based on your size, your structure, to kind of gather your team to complete the process. And I feel like that does lead really well into Mary's question, and I'll read it out. It says, we have 28 buildings, main museum, collection center, office buildings, and historic properties. Do you recommend we do basically one assessment for each of these, or, you know, one overall, and then definitely noting historic properties having serious challenges? So we did pilot with a couple organizations that were a similar model that had lots of different geographic locations, or maybe even within their, you know, their own one space, the spaces, you know, varied so much, or the programs varied so much that one self-assessment just wouldn't capture it. And so there are kind of two ways to approach this. If each of those, you know, 28 buildings or sites are truly unique, so there are kind of no organizational approach questions or programming questions that would be true for all of them, then yes, you can do as many individual self-assessments as you'd like. You just need a different email address. What seemed to be more resonant with orgs that were kind of in this structure is that there were some things that were true, some sections of the self-assessment that were true for all of the properties, for all of the locations, for all of the programs. In a lot of cases, that was like access services as well as organizational approach. So they would complete those. And then just the sections that were unique, like space or maybe programming, would be completed by those individual, you know, buildings or programs or sites. So in the self-assessment, you can skip any question, any section that isn't relevant, and just have a report for the ones that are. So in the case of the organization I'm talking about, they got one kind of overall organizational report, and then we're having specific sites complete specific sections, and they would just get a report of those things that were relevant. So it's really up to you, but as long as there's a unique email, you can do as much or as little as you'd like. Same is true for the accessibility plan as well. We have orgs that are kind of like, we want everything in one place, and we're just going to add a filter, right, of the location, and then we can organize and sort by that. We have others that are kind of like, no, we need unique access plans for each of these specific building locations. So it's up to you. That's another place too. We are happy to help if that feels tricky and you want to like talk through solutions.
This is Charles, and I just want to add in, as far as the requirement, one report will do. However, what we want is just, as Portia described, we want you to really use this tool to activate your policies and procedures and future movement. So we only require one. I mean, that's sort of adjacent to the grant, but use the tool as liberally and as broadly as you can, that you have the human and financial capacity for, because it will help you and support your efforts. So for us, the council, one report will do. And as I said, it's a simple attestation. We hope you're being honest. I'm not getting any data, but it really is and this is my enthusiasm, the tools to help us be bigger, stronger, better, and more accessible. Also, to answer Maureen's question about $3,000 versus $5,000, I don't know if I have an old web page, because the Innovation Fund used to be 3,000. It is now 5,000. And so that's something either I've missed on the page or I've cached an old council page somehow by mistake.
It looks like, this is Nicole, it looks like it's in the preview that shows up in the chat, but once you click on the link, you will see it says 5,000. So it's just some kind of glitch, it looks like.
Back in the old days, yes. Okay.
Any other questions about the self-assessment?
And as noted, we will have other sessions. The council itself will be spotlighting this work for all the organizations, but I'm sure they'll be enthusiastic, but we're super enthusiastic. So there's other sessions coming up that will support this work. And again, It's a year to even take to participate in the tool, and then another year to come up with your plan. However, we have been talking about plans and these NEA requirements for a while. So, like I said, I approach this work with a great deal of enthusiasm. You've got a lot of support willing to help you get there, and you'll be leading the others who will be 2 years behind. Okay, I'm going to take a moment to end the recording, and then we will go from there.